Okay, thank you, Pandit. Good to see you here for this day. We are not in a retreat, more we're learning about or a workshop situation. For a lot of people, they don't have a regular teacher they can consult. So what I'd like to happen during the day is that you get some overview of the practice so that you can understand what you're doing to allow you to make your adjustments or manage the practice yourself, essentially. I have no idea of what level, how much practice, if you're just beginners. So while I think that might come apparent as we go along, now, the first thing is that we'll go through the very basics of the insight meditation. Could people indicate whether they've done this practice before? I'd like to have an idea what, if you've done this practice. Could you just put, how many people have done this practice? Okay, so, and some people who've not done it at all. So there's not that many, there's just two. Okay, so we'll have to accommodate our two. Actually, they're the perfect people to be here, because you must already have established habits and patterns of practice, which is fine. But if you can be open to hearing perhaps something fresh, but for a newcomer, excellent. We can accommodate you very well. Perhaps then, just to preface what we're going to say, if you like, that there are two modes of meditation, two ways to do it, two approaches, two types of meditation. And this day we'll go through the basics of the insight or Vipassana meditation. And this afternoon sometime we'll bring in the second mode, which is concentration-based, known as samatha. And the practice there will be loving-kindness or metta bhavana. So we'll go through the basics of the awareness mode and then the concentration-based mode of meditation. To put the practice in its context, as a meditator, as an insight meditator, you should have some familiarity with the framework for the practice, the set of the instructions the Buddha actually gave. I'm sure many of you who've already practiced would know of that. That is the 4 establishments of this practice of mindfulness, right? So the framework is 4 areas of attention, or this mindfulness. Mindfulness can be said to be presence of mind. Attentiveness or mindfulness first to the body, the physicality. Mindfulness of one's feelings here being quality of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. For example, you're sitting now and on the body, is it pleasant or unpleasant? Sensations you're experiencing? Rather than when we talk about feelings, not to be confused with emotions, because in the English language, as you know, they can be interchangeable. So body, feelings, and the next area of attention or mindfulness are the mind states or emotions / the knowing or the consciousness. And the 4th are mental objects. Well, simplified, there's simply one's thoughts, one's mental constructions. So that's just a very base sketch body, feelings, mind states, mental objects or thinking. So the practice is not confined to a sitting, static, cross-leg posture. We use this posture, the classical cross-leg posture, as it were, as a viewing platform to introspect, to observe what is happening subjectively, what is happening in the body and the mind. We then can move out what's happening externally, in the sensory world, when you see, hear, smell, taste and touch. So that means you can take this practice out into your everyday life and be present and mindful with whatever you're doing in your daily routine. So there's the formal sitting. Then throughout this day, I will be prompting you to pay attention to whatever you're doing, even though you may be having a meal, you go into the bathroom, even when you're talking to each other, that's fine too. Any and every activity throughout the day can be used for this practice. Not to just see it as a sitting practice in the hall. Now, you can't sit all day. You can if you wish, but I'm sure that you after half an hour, you want to move. So, while we have a formal sitting sessions, which can be half an hour up to an hour or even more, we also have movement, awareness of the movement when you walk. So there's a formal exercise as walking, awareness of the walking. That walking, that exercise, helps you to tune into all body movements, every limb movement you make. So if you reach for the door to open a door, that is movement. When you move to eat, that is all movement. So the formal exercise of the walking, awareness of the movement in walking, is to take you into movements or activities of the body throughout the day. So we have three areas of practice: formal sitting, as you would expect, formal walking, and just as importantly, perhaps even more so, awareness of actions as you get around in your routine throughout the day. And to support that, because Vipassana can be quite dry, challenging if you like, especially as far as emotions might come through. When we look at the set of instructions the Buddha gave in the Satipatthana Sutta, the very first sentence is, when he explained what the aim of this practice is, of mindfulness, he said, it is for the purification of beings. So Vipassana actually is not so much practiced in Buddhist countries, or it's always tended to fall away. What we're following, what I'm coming from, and I think majorly this centre, is the Vipassana practice that was reseeded back into Thailand and Sri Lanka and other Theravada countries, as well as spread out into the West, from Burma, from Mahasi Sayadaw's practice essentially. Of course, there are other variations of Vipassana in Burma. So it's not so easy. People tend to default to the concentration mode. I would put that to you, because what you would experience, perhaps more so in doing intensive Vipassana, is a discharge, a ventilation of material from the undermind, if you like. old material, perhaps traumas or emotions will come through. So how you relate to that is critical. In fact, in Vipassana, it's important that you're clear, you're aware of, say, an emotion that might arise, whether it's positive or negative, and its effect it's having on you, or how you're relating to it, whether you're resisting it as not wanted, unpleasant, or pulling it in, getting attached to it, indulging in it, if you like. So, anyway, I'll just go through first of the basics for those especially who are new to the practice. In our approach, I mean, there are many variations on Vipassana. I've been trained in the Burmese Mahasi Sayadaw way. So we use the movement, essentially. Movement is the key to do this practice if you were following the Mahasi Sayadaw tradition. Movement, physical movement, and mental movement. Now, we use in the body, and those who are familiar with the text will know there are various topics there, that one would work with. But we use the elements in the body, the primary elements. You know the four primary elements as names, as concepts, earth, air, fire and water, but we would know experientially these elements, primarily, especially the air element. And the air element has the specific characteristics of motion, vibration and support, and also there's a tactile component to this air element. What's also characteristic of the Mahasi approach is that we have first a primary object and everything else essentially is secondary. So in the sitting practice, the primary object is movement, not breathing, movement of the abdomen. The air comes in, which is the cause, and the effect is expansion and contraction of the abdomen. So it's not breathing. Of course, it's caused by the breathing, but it's movement of the air, stream of air in the abdomen and expands, and then the release of that air is contraction. So this movement is in the center of the body. And it's natural movement. In no way do you interfere with it, force it, manipulate it in any way. You have to tune in. Essentially, this practice is an attunement. We are not interfering with it. We allow the natural movement to manifest. Sometimes, if the attention is not there, you will not be knowing it. There's not an expectation or an assumption that you will be with that movement all the time. The mind will avert to other objects. Thinking. We're not trying to block or stop the thinking. We are allowing the preoccupations of the mind to naturally, that you would have now, the business of the mind, to naturally quieten and settle. And then the deeper levels of material will then surface to allow a discharge, a ventilation. So we work with thinking, not to block it, not to stop it, not to suppress it, but to allow the mind to naturally quieten, so we come to a more quiet, silent mind. We're not identifying, we're not bouncing off, as it were, our thoughts, the content of the mind, because mostly we're caught up in the content of the mind. So we can just, with practice, and developing the skill, we can just observe even the thinking itself without getting caught up in it. So thinking would be when you do this exercise in the sitting. Thinking, mind states, emotions will arise, feelings will arise, body discomfort, sensations will be there. We're not so concerned with external sounds in the formal sitting. That would come when we move around, go externally. But if a novel sound takes your attention, then you would acknowledge it as a secondary object and then go back to your primary object. So this going from the primary to the secondary, you might notice, actually takes you, you're at the body door, or the mindfulness of the body internally, subjectively, and when something takes your attention, feelings arise, pleasant, unpleasant in the body or the mind, then you go to the second mindfulness, satipatthana. Or if mind states or emotions arise, then you go to the third. If thinkings arise, then you go to the fourth. See, so actually, while you're based on the body and tuning into the elements, the other areas of attention, as given by the Buddha, this framework, come into play as well. You see? So you're not confined to one object. Yeah? We're not just inducing concentration and then some mind state to feel good. We're actually there as an observer, a witness what is happening in your body and mind as it's happening, without one hopes eventually, without reaction, without straining. So that's you know, it's quite a difficult thing to do if we're very ambitious to achieve, to extract something out of it. Essentially this practice is a witnessing, is an attunement. It's building up a state of receptivity. If you have ambition to extract something out of it, it doesn't go away. If we look at the basic teaching the Buddha gave, the Eightfold Path, there are 3 meditation skills there. The first is application. One applies oneself. Of course, effort is in that. One makes effort to apply oneself. It seems almost, when one thinks about, well, why put effort in? Of course, you might say, but no, actually, you need to really consciously apply yourself and be able to sustain that application. Because this is practice. Practice is repeated performance to develop the skill. So you have to sustain that practice, that repetition. The next meditation skill is this sati, what we're doing. Sati, it translates as mindfulness, presence of mind. And that's the core, that's the fundamental Buddhist meditation practice, this presence of mind. Keeping the mind on track with what you're doing. And that mindfulness is coupled with a investigation. It's not only present, one also has to pick up the characteristic of what is observed, what is focused on. One finds the specific characteristics which will reveal the universal characteristics. So, application to mindfulness. Mindfulness of the body, the feelings, mind states, and the mental objects or thinking. The third factor in the meditation skills is it says samadhi, and it's probably a little unorthodox interpretation, but I would say that's intensification of the meditation, intensification, magnification of the mindfulness which will expose its characteristics. Other people, there's some confusion there. Some people will say, well, it's concentration, it's jhana. I would say logically it moves from applying oneself to the practice of mindfulness, and then one would intensify that. Because unless it's intensified, it's like you're just on the surface. But once you've magnified, you're exposing very deep levels of the mind and its phenomena. Now, during the day, I don't know that little sort of rough sketch. Is there anything? I'm told too there are some French speakers here. Sorry, I don't parlez-vous français. Did you follow that? Can you understand that? That's good. I think what we shall do is a guided meditation. Awareness of this elements in the body. We focus first on the air element, but of course other elements will come through. You know, the so-called fire element will manifest as heat or temperature. Earth would be hardness or softness or lightness or heaviness. These qualities will be there. But we're primarily focused on the internal so-called wind element or the vibratory element in the body. I've mentioned that we use this abdomen movement. So those who have not practiced before, you might just put your hand on the abdomen, the low abdomen, and can everybody find that movement? That natural movement? Anybody who can't, we'll call an ambulance. So if you can find it externally with your hand there, all you need to do is find it without your hand there, internally. I'll stress again, it's an attunement. You're feeling into that, finding the movement. Now, if you go to a subtle object, like this natural movement, it will tend to contract. So I'm suggesting you go to a gross object first and establish there as you're now sitting and the body is touching. Cushion and buttocks to the cushion or feet to the floor, wherever, the predominant sitting touch point. You go to that first and establish there, and then you'll find coming up from that sitting touch point, you'll naturally move, you'll pick up the natural movement of the abdomen. But if you come from the top, you will be working from as the breathing. So we're not interested in the breathing. We want to come up into the movement. So, okay, you'll sit whatever comfortable position you can maintain for a while. Make yourself comfortable. Of course, the spine has to be erect. And find the balance in the body. Even those people sitting on the chairs too, you need to keep the spine erect, as if the head is balancing on a pole. It's useful when you first sit to do a little preparatory exercise in relaxing and opening up the body and making the connection. We spend so much time in our heads, as it were, thinking and cogitating. So we're coming into the body. So you'll fold your hands in the laps and close your eyes because we're going to go internally, subjectively, and relax the body. Now, bring your attention to the predominant sitting touch point. You're touching, whatever that might be. Sitting touch point, predominant one. Focus on it. And you can bring in another device, which I should mention. You can name it too. You can mentally note that touch. Very lightly name it as touching, touching. But the mental noting would be 90% more. So to help you stay with it, direct your attention there, you can name it if you wish as touching, touching. So you've found the predominant sitting touch point. So explore it, you examine it as it were. Its quality, is it hard or soft or whatever, there may even be some feeling there or tension there. So there's physical sensation and the mind that knows it. There's the consciousness of the sensation of that contact, touch and knowing. So there's two things, there are a couple. There's a sensation and the knowing of it. It's important, the consciousness of that. Now when you sit, you would not scratch or move. You sustain the movement. If you do have to move, you must know why. It can be, of course, you're uncomfortable, or it's the body caused the movement, or there's disturbances in the mind. So it's important that you, during the formal sitting, the posture is maintained and there's no unconscious movement once you've established. If there is, for instance, there might be irritation on the skin, you then would, instead of moving your arm to relieve it, you would know it's itchy, irritation on the skin, the urge to relieve it. It may seem a very trivial example, but by knowing that urge and not playing into it, you could possibly know the reason why we suffer. That's the urges and desires and hankerings in the mind. So you have the touch and the knowing of it. Now allow the attention to naturally flow into the expansion and contraction, following the air, the movement, natural movement of the air. And if you wish, you can lightly name it concurrent with the movement. As it expands or rises, you name it rising, rising, rising. And as it falls, you would again know it as falling. So relax into the movement. Without straining. Just find the natural movement. No hand movement, please. You don't need to put your hands on your knees. It's best if you put them in and folded in front of you, yeah. It'll create tension. Okay. See if you can find the beginning of the movement, the beginning of the rising movement, and the beginning of the falling movement. If you're on track, you might be able to pick up at the top of the rising movement some pressure that would indicate that you're actually with the column of air as it expands and contracts within the abdomen. It's practice. It might take some while for it to develop. So some patience and forbearance, the Buddha said, is the power of the meditator. So just take it easy, just feel into the movement. It helps if you close your eyes, you won't get distracted. You're there just as a witness. What is happening with the movement, and now perhaps thoughts have come up. You acknowledge them as thinking, you name them as thinking. Very likely you might be feeling sleepy, so that's a mind state. You name that sleepy. Or you might be more calm, so any mind state that comes up, calm, sleepy, thinking. And when you've acknowledged it, then you will return back to the primary object, the expansion and contraction of the abdomen. If you hear a sound, like the door opening, then you could acknowledge it and go back to the movement of the abdomen as your primary object. During a session, you can always check whether there's any contraction or tension in the body. as feelings, body sensations. Check the body and relax any contraction, any tightness, but don't move it if you can avoid it. Having checked the body for any tension, then just return back to the examining this natural movement, rise and falling. There's sleepiness. You can name it very sharply. Sleepy, sleepy, sleepy. Don't allow the mind to get drugged. You can always feel during a session, if you feel that you've lost it, then you can re-establish your attention on the sitting touch point again. Go back to the sitting touch point if you feel you've not been able to stay with the movement of the abdomen, and re-establish on the sitting touch point. You must not use hand movements, please. If there's itchiness, you know what to do. If it's irritation on the nose, then you know the irritation. Within a session, if you find that it's too painful, you can move perhaps once. If you say, you sit within a half-hour session, allow yourself to move, change the posture just once. But don't make it a habit, because you want to extend the period of practice. You can stay in one posture. What now is apparent to, I'm sure, to some people, there's also painful sensations if you're not used to sitting in the cross-leg posture. So you can work with pain, unpleasant sensations in the body to some extent. You can name it, if you like, as pain, discomfort, But you have to stay alert and attentive. Be aware of whatever mind state is there, especially if there's just calm. You must be investigating, examining, tracking whatever is happening in the body and mind as it occurs. So to be alert. Soften into the pain. Relax into the painful sensations. And maintain the knowing of it. Not identifying with it if one can. Okay, I think you've had enough. So we're coming to the end of this session, but before you break out, please, we'll review what happened in the session. You might reflect back what was the mind state when you started and what's happened now through that session. And as you release the posture, then notice how the relief of the pressure or the pain or So you take any awareness you might have, develop any concentration out into what you're doing. So if you wish, you can just stretch a little where you're seating. Okay, now I can see that a lot of you are tired and you're having problems with the posture. That's very natural, and of course, if we're tired, we're brought in a lot. We're a lot of sleepiness into the session because, of course, we've probably got some sleep debt. Really, we don't have time to have an afternoon nap. No. Have we? No. Have we? Well, where to have a nap, I don't know. But at our retreats, we always, after lunch, have a compulsory session where people go at least up to an hour, half an hour, and have a rest, have a sleep. Because I'm sure a lot of you are feeling sleepy. A number I notice. Nobody snored. That's very good. You did very well. So that's what you'll find when you come to meditation. There's three things. There's often sleepiness, there's a lot of thinking, and there's pain. But you can work with pain. Because if it's only just posture pain, okay, but if it's some pre-existing condition like a back problem, then we don't try to push through it. But if it's merely because you're not used to, the body's not used to sitting cross-legged, then it's actually something that's really worth working with. It can give you a lot of little insights. So working with pain, essentially you've got to relax. Naturally the muscles are contracting, so as best you can you soften into it. Eventually you'll be able to have the close enough attention that you'll be able to pick up, if there's no resistance there, or the mind doesn't want it to go away, no physical resistance, or the mind doesn't want it to go away, you'll find just it will expose, manifest some particular characteristic. Then you know you're close with it. You've aligned your awareness with just the specific characteristic that's manifest, not just pain. Pain also is localized. If it's pain in a knee, well, it's pain in a knee. It's not all over the body. So when the specific characteristic, you might experience throbbing, stabbing, heat, whatever, and just the mind that knows it, that's why it's important, this knowing of, consciousness of paired is there, one is aware of it as well. There's the specific characteristic, heat, throbbing, stabbing, tension, whatever, and just the knowing of it. When that's one-to-one alignment, and eventually we'll get there, then it will move or change in some way. You know, if you're locked into it, then it knows you're in struggle. You've blocked it. So eventually, you would hope that you'll be able to bear the painful sensation and be able to experience just its manifestation as a specific characteristic, which is often heat or throbbing and stabbing, and there's no mental resistance, not wanting it to go away, not moving away from it. Then you'll have that effect. It will change, moves around the body or whatever. It won't necessarily, you haven't resolved it, or it's not going to, it'll go away. It's just changed. And so you're experiencing directly the nature of change, the fact of change. Everything is changing. There's a physical manifestation of that in the body. So that's a little insight that you would. So there's less identification with the body. And the Buddha in the Satipatthana Sutta, I don't know if you're at all familiar with the four foundations of mindfulness. In the final section, the Dhammanupassana and the mental phenomena or mental objects, the Buddha actually there's a section that deals with the 5 aggregates or groups of things that one is identifying with. First, it's the body, obviously. Feelings, yep, we've mentioned feelings, pleasant, unpleasant feelings. We're all experiencing feelings now, always feelings. If you're awake, there's feelings manifesting. Feelings, perception, what you recognise, the mental constructions, the fabrications of the mind, the story, if you like. autobiographical self, and the knowing, the consciousness. So that's why very clear that you've got to be aware of the consciousness. So when one is aware of them, you'll know eventually that they're not fixed. The phenomena is constantly changing. So this change is the critical thing to be noticing as you observe the natural change of things constantly. So that is what because we're identifying with the body unknowingly, unawares that we are, and we more identify with its form and shape, its appearance, not the actual reality of the body, which is one way. It's just built up of these elements, these processes. So when you look at processes, when you're looking at the, exploring what might be the true nature of things, of phenomena, they have two characteristics. One is specific or particular, and that can only be found through the experiential, and that will expose the general or universal characteristic, which is only known if one knows the specific. So it's experiential knowing. It's not book knowledge. It's not acquired knowledge from reading or hearing about. It's actually you're investigating your own body and mind phenomena to see its actuality, its reality, rather than what you assume or imagine or suppose or condition to see. So there's insights will arise. Slowly, and that would that simply knowing the pain and relating it to that why will expose that it's actually not. It was changing and moving like everything else. Anyway, you've sat there for a little while, and we're trying to try to help you to understand what's happening. And we'll just quickly go around, anybody who's got questions or some experience they'd like to bring up. Now, if you come up with a question, then you're helping somebody else. Meditation usually is a very solitary thing, a subjective thing. You sit there seeing somebody in a beautiful posture, hasn't moved a muscle, but his mind might have been going. So it's useful to hear what other people are experiencing, and then you might get some help that way. So is anybody prepared to just say what happened in that sit? Were you able to find the movement? What happened? Could somebody would like to say? Yes.
And if no one volunteers, we pick someone. What I'll do is, if you tell me, then I'll repeat it for everybody, because not everybody will be able to hear you. So, Tanya. Okay, so the question is about Vedana or feelings. A little earlier on,ญญาวโรsaid, feelings in English often means emotions, but in Buddhism it means liking or disliking. The emotions are part of the mind states. I'm not sure if I just answered the question there.
That's okay.
So Tanya was saying she's not sure on the where emotions come in, are these mind states or feelings?
Yeah. So the Buddha said all things converge into feelings. Now he was referring to the technical term Vedana, or pleasant quality, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. But in the English language, as we've just discussed, we use feelings interchangeably with emotions, so it's confusing, I think in Thai, when they say feelings, Vedana, they mean what? Something.
Vedana is liking, disliking, neutral.
Neutral, yeah. But so there's pleasant, unpleasant qualities when there's some contact, the body's contact, when one sees, hears, smells, taste and touch, any of the five senses, there's feelings. But there's also that feeling quality in mental feelings, in say an emotion that rises and that content that will invoke memories of past associations. Feelings will arise too, and we say that's mental feelings. Rather than, we usually confine the body sensations as its physical feelings, and then there's mental feelings arise with emotions. But any contact, there is feelings. Body contact, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, there's feelings. So if one knows feelings as pleasant, then of course one is pulling it in. If it's unpleasant, we're pushing it away. It's liking, disliking constantly. Whether it's taste or sounds or smells or touch, it's constant, you see. If you're aware of them, then it's possible in the perceptual process just to pick up feelings as feelings, because when there's any contact and pleasant arises, then we immediately have a thought about it, an association, just immediate association, and then we elaborate on it. So feelings is critical in this practice, to be knowing feelings all the time. Just to be knowing them as feelings, not to go any further than that.
So the question before was, does anyone want to relate the experience of meditating this morning? Okay.
I have a totally boring experience earlier. I just wondered if you could recommend any advice. I kept going to sleep. Despite my best efforts, I'm tired.
Yes.
I thought biting my
Yes, I have a really good, you know, the thing, lying flat on a bed is perfect. There's no magic way not to go. If you're tired, you think you were tired? Have you had good sleep last night?
I haven't had a good sleep in about 10 years.
Well, well, yeah, that's it. There's no magic way to do it. You know, have you got sleep apnea or some problem regarding your sleep? Yes.
But I kept drifting off. I kept going back. I had actually thought of stabbing myself with a needle or something.
Well, you could sit on an edge of a cliff or something like that. Or
I can make a suggestion actually. If you're just falling asleep so deeply in meditation, but you don't sleep at night for 10 years, why don't you try meditating when you go to bed at night? Then you'll be in deep sleep.
There was a disciple of the Buddha, well-known Moggallana, who had some problem. I mean, it may be psychological too. I'm not saying it's your case, but you'll find, you know, this fight or flight. Some people will, you know, there's difficulty in the mind or whatever. Then you will attack it, you know, fight, or you move away from it. For some people who have chronic sort of, and they have had a rest and there's not a problem there, natural sleep quality, they're okay, and somehow they always seem to go to sleep in the sitting. Then it could be that the mind's moving away from things. That possible is. But the Buddha did recommend to Moggallana, one of his chief disciples, that you pull the eardrums. I've not tried it myself, but that's all I can pass on. I know it's not very... It's supposed to wake you up, I don't know. I think it's something to do with shiatsu and these sort of things, you know, you can sort of stimulate your earlobes. Anyway, it's a difficult thing if you... I think it's very important that you don't allow yourself to get into a habit. I know one thing I've done over my many years of practice, if I felt sleepy, I've got up. If I was tired, I never sit down, and I'll go walking. So I'll keep alert. The most critical thing, one of my very early teachers, Manindraji, would say, we can sum up all this practice, you must be alert. If you're not alert, See, that is difficult. If you're tending to go off to sleep, you must be alert. So I suggest you walk or pull your ears or, I don't know, have a rest.
Ajahn Chah,
sorry, I can't help you.
Ajahn Chah had a novel solution. He said, you go and sit on the edge of a well.
Yeah, edge of things. I hope there's a safety net there, otherwise we're in. Okay, is there anything else that you might come up?
Okay.
Meditation in a way can be linked also to relaxation. Because talking about when you sleep or feeling like in this state of in-between, you never mentioned anything about relaxing, but is it linked in a way? Is it normal to relax when you try to meditate? Or
Okay.
Yes, most definitely.
So the question is, how is meditation linked to relaxation? Is it the same or is it different? How are they related?
Well, firstly, you see most people who would, or most traditions will do meditation. It's essentially a practice of one-pointedness, and that's inducing a calm in the mind, right? Now, so you feel good. And people come to meditation often to feel good, which is fine, you know. But it can be used, that base of calm that you might have established through concentration, through fixing the mind on one object, then you might overcome any I don't know about sleepiness, but certainly any agitation or discomfort in the body, so you feel good. And that's why it's very attractive that you like to come and, well, we want to feel good. But you don't get any understanding or insights, you see. Now, it's not to say Vipassana is torture. It needn't be. So you very much need to relax and open up the body, and if a calm mind state will naturally occur anyway, with fluency in the practice, then one knows it, but one doesn't get attached to it. What will mature in Vipassana practice is more equipoise, equanimity. So if it's difficult, okay. Or if it's pleasant, you don't grab for it. Or if it's unpleasant, it's okay too. So one has more homeostatic balance. One has equanimity as the maturing factor, rather than just going off in an induced state of calm. So that's why people might initially find a lot of difficulty, just even in getting used to being there as an observer, say even to the body, because we're more used to reacting and playing in the mind and finding ways to relieve ourselves rather than accepting what is actually happening. So we don't really recommend, say, doing hatha yoga or something that would cover up or change the mind states. We're just prepared to accept whatever happens to be manifesting, whether it's sleepiness or agitation or pleasant or unpleasant, you know. And we can observe it and witness it, and not react to it. And that builds up, especially with emotions. We can accept emotion, it's pleasant or unpleasant, and we become more equanimous and we create space. We're not identifying. One of the first openings to the insight knowledges is that one is able to see the distinction between mind and body. Normally they sort of merge. We act as if the body leads, but it's the mind that leads, you see. So when we just start witnessing, we notice, the movement, before I can move, there's an intention there. There's a mental intention. But if I just move and scratch, I won't know anything. If I just randomly, unconsciously move. So what's unconscious becomes more conscious. One sees that one doesn't automatically, unknowingly, identify with the body or mind. And especially that can become obvious to you with practice. I mean, at first it's quite rough. It's very difficult to settle in. I appreciate that. It's uncomfortable and you're not used to sitting this way, and you're just confined to watching what's happening in your body and mind. Normally we distract ourselves. Even when we relax, we turn on the television or we go up on a net or, So now we're in a situation where we've got to be observing just as it's happening, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, whether it's okay or difficult. Because the maturity factor based on the mindfulness and investigation of the phenomenon, those couple will lead to equanimity. So there's the benefit eventually, if you're prepared to do what might be the hard work initially anyway.
Equanimity, upekkha. Right? Upekkha.
Yeah.
Are we going to do some walking this morning?
Yeah. So before we, we can now, won't leave you sitting all day. I mentioned we'll do walking. Actually, you can find everything in the movement in walking that you might find in the sitting, as far as the elements goes. Now, there's different ways to walk. We could walk just naturally, so we allow the time to settle down and then sit. But here we're doing a specific exercise to tune into the sensations coming from movement. If we can find the sensations from movement in the formal exercise and the walking, then any limb movement, any body movement, as we move around the place, that also we can know the element expressing itself as movement, vibration. So I'll just throw that up in the air. I wouldn't suppose that in just as a beginner that you would find anything very deep. But in the walking, that is essentially exercise, and it's somewhat contradictory in the formal walking as a set of instructions, because we're just confining ourselves to the actual movement of the steps in the walking. Rather than the form and shape of the limb or the foot. Now, first we break up the step into its component parts. When you make a step in walking, there are 6 component parts.
Can I demonstrate as you say it? Can I demonstrate as you go through the 6?
I can demonstrate this time.
Huh?
I'll demonstrate.
You'll demonstrate, okay.
Good. I've got more stuff. So we're breaking up that movement into its 6 parts. Eventually, you'll find, you won't today, I'm just throwing it up in the air. Eventually you'll find not just 6 parts, but many, many parts within that part one movement. Anyway, you can forget that because you won't find it, but you will eventually, we'd hope, with practice, intensive practice. So when we move, we'll again bring in this mental noting concurrent with each part of the step. This mental noting or labeling is just a device to help you be with the movement. It mustn't replace the experience of the movement, but it's just done very lightly if you need to, especially initially, to name the movement as you move. Okay? So raising, lifting, pushing, dropping, touching, pressing. That's 6 parts of the step. But actually, for the beginner, that might be too much. Again, you may do 3 or 4, just lifting, pushing, dropping, touching. Okay. Now, initially it might just be very mechanical. And you'll find many meditators who've done this practice, that's what's happening for them. It's just a mechanical naming of the parts of the step. But that's not the point of the exercise. The point is to find the vibratory level, as it were, this discontinuous movement within the movement, because then you're not identifying with the form and shape. So then there's not that identification with the limb or the foot or the body. It's just pure movement. And if you were to get there, what you would experience is no sense of I am moving it. So you might have puzzled over or heard about this Buddhist notion of non-self. So this could be an actual experience, because when you're there with the element itself and not with a form and shape, then the element will express itself as it is. And it's actually things from left field, as it were, will come in, and you will not, there's just movement of itself. There's no sense of I'm moving it. Anyway, so naming the parts of self will help you to be, but very lightly. We usually have a track, say across this room, would be more than enough, and walk up to 1 hour. Minimum time is half an hour, because this practice is not meditation really, it's what we call bhavana. Meditation doesn't apply here, it's bhavana. That's a Pali term meaning to develop, to grow, to develop, rather than meditate on something, you're actually developing a quality. So there's vipassana bhavana, which means to develop insight, or samatha bhavana, concentration, or metta bhavana. So this is developmental. So you have to allow some time for the practice to develop, to mature, to grow. And it's repetitious. That you repeat the exercise so that you develop the skill, that you go from from gross, obvious movements into more subtleties, and so you fine tune into the movement, that you pick up its characteristics. So that takes a little time and effort and sustaining that effort and examining and feeling into the movement, sensing into the movement. It's not a mechanical exercise, how long you can name the thing for, which often is the case for people. So, okay, we've broken up it into 6 parts, and while that's happening, like in the sitting, there'll be thinking going on. But because you're occupied with naming the parts or just pure awareness of the movement, then that tends to go into the background. It becomes sort of background static or noise. This could be still thinking, but as long as you're not caught up in it, then just let it be. It's there, but you're not engaged with it. Actually, that will help you when you come to the sit in relating to the thinking, because it's just, you're not bouncing off it, you're not playing it with the thought, you're not engaged with it. So in this walking exercise, thinking will be there, unless it overtakes you and you find you're just self-thinking, then you would stop and then focus on the thinking. But be comfortable with it being present, but not being predominant, at least. Keep the eyes down about 2 meters in front of you. If you start looking around, you'll lose the concentration. So keep the eyes moving around. For moving around, you'll notice that if you have ever been aware of the walking movement, that actually it's almost a falling movement. You sort of tend to lean into the floor and as we step. So keep the body up, relaxed, but straight, because you might get some strain in the back. Like in the sitting, you would first stand and go scan through the body, and again you would make contact with the feet to the floor. So you establish awareness into the body. You scan and relax, feeling the touch, and then you would then move out. You could, if you've done this practice before you move, note the intention to move, the mental impulse to move, if that was the case. Or otherwise, you just stand there and move. But in the walking, we do one thing at a time. So so when we raise, lift, move, touch and place, we're actually standing on one leg, supporting ourselves on one leg. This is not a natural thing to do. So you've got to get used to the balance of it. And just keep your attention on the foot that is moving. But that might again take a little time to get used to it. Okay? I think I'm competing with the Venerable here, who's going to do the performance, and while I know he's quite skilled, I think I need to talk. I've got a way I can talk in. So I'll give you a demonstration. Now, while I'm on about the movement in walking, I'm actually sitting. So before I move, I'm aware of the posture of sitting. Actually, the instruction is aware of the 4 primary postures: sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. So before I move, I'm aware, I could say, make a mental note, sitting, sitting, sitting. Okay? And now I'm moving, moving, moving. Okay? And I'm aware there's some discomfort in sitting on this cushion, which doesn't really support me. I'm going to take just a minute to feel those little discomfort. It's not a very firm seat. And now I'm pushing up the old body to stand. Stand, stand, stand. That's a relief. That's good, eh? Feels good just standing and stretch. Okay, so here we are, standing. Now, my track is across the room, so I'll turning. I'm going to name the turning as well. I'll do a step on the side. Okay, so I'm standing. I'm feeling the touching. I've got to make contact. And I'm relaxing the body. Okay. You can stand there. What's the problem? Just standing. I didn't say you can. I'll just sit where you are, sorry. You just sit for some time. You can do standing meditation, but just not now, thank you. Sorry. Okay. Now, before I move, I'm the intention with raising the foot, which is the heel going up, lifting the foot. I step, I'm balancing, and I step only the length of the foot and bring the foot down flat. I'm not exaggerating the movement. If I step out, I'll go out of balance. Okay? So I'm standing and lifting the heel, lifting's the heel, raising, pushing, stepping, allowing it to drop, touching, press. Raising, lifting, pushing, dropping, touching, press. Raising, lifting. See, I'm actually, when you normally walk, when you're part way through one step, the other one's coming up, isn't it? You're walking like that, you're just walking up and down like this. So you're partly, but in this we're doing one thing at a time. So we're standing, raising, lifting, pushing, dropping, touching, pressing. That's all. Keeping the eyes, raising, lifting, pushing, dropping, pressing. Now, We feel into the movement, sense into the movement, raising, lifting, without identifying with the foot. So what actually we're focused on? Not any other part of the body, not the legs, not the abdomen, not the foot. So what have you got? Just pure movement. I'm trying to sense, feel into the movement, not the foot, not the abdomen, nothing else. Right? And you've got to keep the foot very soft and relaxed. It's got to be, not tense. So you feel into the movement, raising, lifting, touch. Even the pressing is not so important. Not counting, nothing to do with the breathing, raising, lifting, pushing, dropping, touching, pressing. It's not a slow motion exercise of itself, but necessarily in order to deal with the movement, to find the subtleties of the movement, of course you've got to go slow enough to pick it up. So raising, lifting, pushing. That's all. It's actually quite demanding. It all seems simple to the outside observer, but it's quite a lot of concentration of the movement. So sensing it move, especially to find the beginning of the movement. If you find the beginning of anything, you will find the phases in the movement. There's a beginning, a middle, and end. We don't notice, we're not present sufficiently, we're not there for beginnings. If you find beginnings, the rest, it's changing levels. If you just sort of casually move, well, that's it, you won't find anything. You may name it, we can say raising, lifting, pushing, dropping, touching, pressing. But what's there? Nothing. And people do that. They just go on about this naming business rather than sense into the movement without identifying with a foot. It makes sense? Or is it too... That's all. And it's practice, it will refine with practice. You're going from sort of gross sort of awareness to very subtlety of it. And actually you get so concentrated, you'll see nimittas. You're familiar with nimittas? Even the walking. You need to do at least half an hour more. Minimum, to allow it to refine. When you get to the end, you stand, and the turning movements are also announced. Turning, turning, turning. Where you put the hands is not so important, because leaving the side. In the Zen, they do this. Kinhin, they do that. You don't have to do it. Just holding it down is fine. Up to an hour, you would walk. Not any much over that. Anything over that it's just too much to maintain. It's found. So what we'll do is alternate walking or sitting and walking, whatever suits you. In fact, sometimes it's best to start with a walk and then move into the sit. Especially if the mind is more agitated, or preoccupied with things. You could walk very naturally back and forth, and then go into the detailed movement, and then sit on that. Strategically, for most people, it's best to start off with a walk and then go into a sit. But I'm saying you won't find this. You won't find this very subtle movement now. It's practice, maybe over some weeks of practice, months. But it needn't be so if you don't see it as just a mechanical naming, lifting, pushing, dropping, Whether you synchronize it or not, it doesn't really matter. The point is to find the the sensations within the movement, discontinuous. Because once you have that, what you would then do is, experimentally, you find, immediately you find these very fine, you might just lift a hand up. There's movement there. Huh? And then anytime you reach for something, or brush the teeth, it's all movement. Very interesting, because essentially you're changing levels. You're seeing more in depth, you're seeing, just experiencing the elements without any sense of the self being behind it. Potentially that's there, and even that very simple exercise, walking. People have been enlightened for just doing movement. As you might know, Ananda, you know Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, disciple, cousin. After the Buddha's parinibbana, there's a beautiful statue of that. Ananda was to be recite all that the Buddha had, his talks at the first council, but he'd only just made the initial breakthrough, his Sotapanna. He was supposed to then make the final enlightenment before he could join the council. And he everything we know what the Buddha said during that 45 years of teaching, all the suttas, all the discourses, they start with Evam me suttam. I heard it this way from the Buddha, and yet he hadn't been fully enlightened. So just before, the story is just before he had to report to the council, he practiced very hard overnight. He was getting nowhere. And then as he lay down on the bed, it's just posture. Then it clicked for him. That was it. So it's movement. And the very last person, Subhadda, who in the Parinibbana Sutta, which also that person, according to commentaries, when he was doing walking meditation, he became enlightened. So we find the sitting Buddha. It's not easy to show the walking Buddha, but if you went to Bodh Gaya where the Buddha's enlightened, there's also a Chankaman there where the Buddha walked as well. Anyway, I think we've got enough time that you could try it, okay, before lunch.
So you're welcome to use, some people can use the restaurant canteen room on the left-hand side here. There's a little bit of space out in the front there that's not air-conditioned, but you have more space. But I think if some people go out and use those spaces, there should be enough room in here for everybody to find a short walking path. Okay? And we'll go through till about 11:25, about half an hour. Okay.
So be aware that you're sitting now, okay? You've got to maintain continuity of practice, okay? Just in a general sense, I'm sitting, I'm going to get up, find the walking part, and then we'll walk. Thank you.